Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm joined by a dear friend and mentor. That's Dr. Henry Russell. He is the principal and founder of the St. Augustine's Homeschool Enrichment program that's rooted here in the Ann Arbor area. And they're putting on a play this year called Love's Labour's Lost, penned by no other than, just the very little known William Shakespeare. So, Dr. Russell, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm splendid. It's always good to be with you and to, be around someone who's wise and deeply studied in theology and makes out of it, such joyful noise. So,
I'm looking around the room. You're referring to who? Let me know when the wise man comes in the room. Although I've been a recipient of a lot of your wisdom, and so before we talk about the play proper, which is a big part of how you conceive the work of formation of the soul, can you talk about the wisdom of the sapiential unity, of how St. Augustine's forms souls?
Well, all of the subjects, so-called, which we teach, are reflections of the glory of God. History is the story of God's interaction with his creation and, his great kindness and mercy and our rather snarky and ungrateful responses. But then there are the heroic, and beautiful saints and people of simple faith. So, all right, so history and, of course, philosophy, as St. Thomas so, earnestly strove to show us. And before him, St. Augustine, is a road to knowing more about God. Mm-hmm. When he does not choose to reveal himself face to face, we can nevertheless reason about him from what we know of humanity. And then, of course, once the incarnation has occurred, we can reason about a great deal more. So, but all of our subjects are taught within at least a high conception of their connection to God and how he has structured the world. And, when you have children from very faithful families that are trying to form their children to virtue, and when we have our tutors who are all struggling to be children of God and to pick up their cross and follow him, then the whole atmosphere becomes one of joyful exploration of the holiness of the world and the beauty of the world. And Shakespeare is a part of that beauty, is an extraordinary part of it, as is Dante and many others that we teach.
And that, therefore, is a wondrous segment into why engage in the work of the arts, let alone the study of the arts, which is what St. Augustine is doing in putting on this play, Love's Labour's Lost.
Well, we were made for art, all of us. When Aristotle talks about music and poetry, he understands that the body itself responds especially to music, that it's not merely a mental appreciation, it's a whole body experience, if you like, and that there are biological roots to all of this. And we are all made to love God and to try to come to know him. And part of knowing him is to know beauty, because he is beauty, truth, and goodness at its highest pitch. So what else would we do with our lives except, try to build the beautiful around us, whether you're building it in your own home, in your kitchen, or whether you're trying to build it in the conversations that you have with other human beings, or trying to build it in the outward structures of the world. Everyone is struck when they go to Europe by how much care they used to take to make the beautiful and the humane in their architecture. And some of those lessons come back to America, and but it's a big country. Many others have never been there and don't even have a sense of a humane kind of scale for building our cities and our towns. But it's all there. It's our heritage. Millions of people worked on it. The least we can do is show them the honor of trying to learn what they were trying to do and what they had achieved. And all that plays into our education, and especially music. I mean, I'd love to have, successful drawing classes, and we have offered them, but that art seems to be just so hard for people. And music is hard to do it really well, but somehow we're all born singing songs of one sort or another. We love sound, and children love to sing. So we, began by focusing on Schola and helping them to sing, the most beautiful productions of Palestrina and Bach and Mozart and others. But then to act, to try to embody what Shakespeare is saying is such a tremendous experience at any level. But, the more we can teach in the rehearsals about what's at stake in a Shakespeare play, what he was trying to do, some of which we can't rationally expect people to get just on their own. We have to tell them about it a little bit. But, he's such an artist that even if you're not catching the deepest things that he's doing, there's always a sense of joyful entertainment in his works, unless they're a little depressing, in which case
the tragedies.
It's a tragic appreciation. But we love tragedy. We love, in some senses, to weep and again, Aristotle would say it's good for you. You get it out of your system, for one thing, and you also learn not to just go by your feelings for the main character. We'd all love Macbeth to be a better man and not to be so miserable at the end where he's well on his way to hell.
We'd all love for Hamlet to be a more refinedly virtuous man. His is virtue in the raw, and the whole time you're thinking, just be a little better.
Right, be a little better. You're supposed to be the king. Yeah. Shape up. Stop trying to be a student. It's too late, And especially don't be a student at a university called Wittenberg. Where, of course, the university would not come into existence for another 500 years. But it was the center of Lutheran teachings.
Which jettison the whole language of virtue. And, which goes back to what you were talking about in terms of beauty. I've taught high school before, and it's painful to see that we're raising generations that have more of an appreciation for Taylor Swift than they do for Bach.
Yes.
And now some people are going to hear me say that and go, well, you elitist, lofty individual. But we're continuing on the other side of the break, but this is an important conversation, which is that we, especially as parents and adults, we have an obligation to help form souls to the proper appreciation of beauty. Because our souls were made for art, our souls were made for beauty, and the engagement of beauty in that sense takes work to form so that we can enjoy them well. I'm talking with Dr. Henry Russell of St. Augustine. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Pete. I'm talking with Dr. Henry Russell. He is the principal and the headmaster and the founder of the St. Augustine's Homeschool Enrichment program here in the Ann Arbor area. And it's an amazing program that forms the entire person into the elevated heights of not just reason, but beauty and the faith. And that's what we're talking about today, which is beauty. So, Dr. Russell, as we left off at the break, you mentioned how even for the appreciation of beauty, the soul must be formed to recognize and appreciate and savor it.
Yes.
We can't expect. I love Mozart today. I love Bach today. I wasn't that way at age 19. I was listening to artists I don't want to say on the air.
Right. And the truth is that young people are responding to music that is designed biologically to mislead them, especially to lead them into sensuality that they are in no way mentally or emotionally equipped for. And you know, if they follow it to its logical conclusion, they will ruin themselves and their partners and the children that come there. You know, it's not music is powerful stuff, and you have to be very careful of what you are feeding your children. You wouldn't feed them poison for dinner. Why would you feed them deliberately on things which were designed to appeal to the worst of our nature? On the other hand, we are made for beauty. Now, young people want to be part of whatever their cohort of similarly aged people are doing. So there'll be this, magnetic attraction to whatever's out there, whether it's, Taylor Swift or whether it's, garage grunge.
I have no idea what that is, but okay.
Well, you don't need to. But, you continue giving them the best. You don't feed them, potato chips every night simply because they'd like to have a diet of potato chips and Coke. You don't feed them a diet of bad music. Let them go find that on their own, which they will if they have any money. But you try to give them the very best. And over time, I think what will happen is that they will return to that, even if they forsake it for a while. And of course, it's not the worst thing in the world, as long as they're trying to live as good children of the church. They don't really understand the contradiction between the music they're listening to and the teachings of the saints. Maybe they do a little, but they're not going to leave the saints merely because of the music. They'll leave the saints because no one has told them the depths of the love and the wisdom of the saints and of Jesus, or the many holy men and women who worked so hard through the centuries to build the church, both as clerics and as kings and queens and ordinary citizens. It's funny how you can leave a part of the good and yet not leave the good as a whole. We have to be very careful of expecting, the total package from a 16-year-old. Which is not to say that you would, allow the unbeautiful into your house much. But you'll know that, they will seek some of it out. But what you give them, must be the best that you have to offer that you know about. And we're all, becoming richer in what we know about, I hope. If we're trying, obviously, if we're trying to be good Catholics and good parents.
Which then leads us back to this play that St. Augustine is putting out, Love's Labours Lost. Even the nature of the play, if you spend enough time thinking about it, has very Christian ethical themes. One of the things that really stands out, especially because I preach a lot of covenant theology, has to do with male virtue.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
And so it is laughable, but it comes right out. Fulton Sheen talks about how as go the women, so go the culture. And so these women who accompanied the princess hold the king and his lords to a higher level. So all of their flattery by artistic words and poetry matter not. They actually want to see the virtue that undergirds all of that for a year.
That's right. They demand it.
That's right.
And this is a good thing, right? That is one of the great functions of the feminine, to demand more of men so that they are acting the way they should. And that's why the ending is really quite beautiful in its own way. The men's affections are genuine, but they haven't sacrificed anything for them, and they perhaps have not learned that affection without sacrifice simply isn't enough, because that's the nature of the love of Christ for us that we need to replicate. Our love needs to be based on sacrifice as well. And that's what each of the women demands of the men. And I'm quite confident that they'll all come through and pass the test. But the young men have, they're acting somewhat like boys.
Boys, yes.
They want to be schoolboys. And, they're too old for that. They all hold...
Yeah, they're king and lords.
Right, they are the lords of the land, and therefore they are responsible for the land. It's a comic version of Hamlet. Hamlet will show us the same issue.
From a tragedy standpoint.
Absolutely. And, and Shakespeare knew about this tragedy. He knew several good noblemen who could have become a better ruler than Queen Elizabeth, and who could have helped defend the church and put her back on her feet in England. But they didn't seize their opportunities, and they ended up dead. Walter Raleigh ended up dead. Lord Strang, who was Shakespeare's patron, was poisoned a couple years after this play was published. You don't have infinite time, this is a funny thing to be saying in the 21st century when adolescence is kind of strung out to about the age of 27.
35 at this point, but yeah.
Maybe so, yeah. And for some, there's never an achievement of adulthood. It's probably not a good thing to get into that, but this whole business of adults and their marijuana habits. My goodness, when are you going to grow up? But anyway, ours is a time like that. But Shakespeare saw it too. And now these men aren't vicious in any way.
That's the sense you get, right? They're well-meaning.
They're well-meaning.
In that sense, their affections are genuine.
Yes.
I wouldn't call them pure, definitely not virtuous, but genuine.
They're genuine, and they're content to be
childish,
chaste until marriage, I think. But part of the play, it's more right now. in our time, we focus more on the male and female relationships and the way the women are helping the men with their wit, but also the way that their wit is making them divided among themselves. There's a couple of moments of really nasty catfighting that goes on. But this whole business of oaths, right? It all focuses around
the academy, yeah.
Oaths, right? That they take an oath to study for 3 years and not speak to women and essentially be, kind of like a minor order of monks, which, as we said, it's not appropriate for their age and their station. They were given control of the secular order.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is that it's a reflection of the problem in England where you couldn't get into the university without swearing an oath of supremacy that said that the queen or king was the head of the church, and that what she or he said is far more important than what the Pope said.
Right.
So you'd have to swear your
allegiance to the crown.
Well, you'd have to swear your true self away in order to get the kind of education you knew you needed.
I've been talking with Dr. Henry Russell. St. Augustine's Homeschool Enrichment program is putting on a play this weekend called Love's Labour's Lost. We look forward to seeing you there. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.